Good morning. It's March 2nd, 2022, and welcome to Triggered. Back to all those number twos again. I'm Cory Morgan. This shows the Western Standard's live daily interview, news report show, ranting show on my part. We run every day at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday, except on holidays, unless something's breaking. But you can count on us being here every morning at 11:30. Being live, we really enjoy that format. It's good. We can get some comments, we can get some interaction, get some back and forth. I don't necessarily pass along every comment or question to a guest, but you can throw it out there and I might get it in there. I certainly read them all. And you can comment back and forth with each other. You can discuss. It's fun being live, and we get some really good questions and discourse going on. Of course, we still always want to keep things polite and civil. You know, it's important. I got a couple of very interesting guests on today. Some people might be familiar with Derek Fromm. He's a lawyer. He's often been standing up on constitutional issues, things such as that. And Melanie's interviewed him a number of times. I've known him for a while. And he's going to talk about an Ontario court ruling on family choice in vaccination. The judge just ripped into, and Melanie did an interview on that as well recently, just ripped into the people in general and talking about how the courts should stay out of family choice and out of politics in general. So it's going to be good to talk about. And for the other part with Derek, I want to talk about, he has a heavy metal band. He's had it for quite some time now. And it's called Sympathy. And they got kicked off of YouTube because they put a video out that talked about some things or depicted some things, such as the protests with the truckers convoy and with even comparing it with Tiananmen Square and things. So somehow YouTube said, no, that's it. We're going to yank your video, and they pulled it off there. So the censorship lands all over the place, even down to heavy metal. So it'll be a fun and interesting conversation there. Then I got, speaking of censorship, Kid Carson. People in Vancouver area, Lower Mainland, would be probably familiar with him. He's a very well-known radio DJ down there. He'd been there for quite some time. And he, though, kept speaking his mind on vaccination, on the protests and things like that. And it wasn't so much a full firing, but from the sounds of it with his podcast, him and the radio station basically came to a mutual agreement that he's no longer going to be with them. And he's moved out on his own and he's got a podcast. But it gets back to, again, legacy media not wanting to have broad opinion, expecting group speak, group think. And that's certainly not what we offer around here, and that's part of why radio and talk radio has gotten so terrible and god-awful boring lately. It's everybody's afraid of getting canceled. We don't have that fear here. We don't at all. So I'm going to talk actually quickly. Where am I going here to what's got me going today? And let's talk about, Canadians and the rest of the world. We've been horrified by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, a peaceful country has had a foreign nation come in and try and occupy it. Most nations don't have the military ability or the will to directly intervene in the conflict. The military entrance of a third party into the conflict would probably lead to a third world war. Nations have been responding to the war by providing financial and material aid to Ukraine while taking actions to put financial pressure on Russia. And Canada hasn't been an exception. We lent money to Ukraine while sending arms to them for defense. And Russian planes have been banned from Canadian airspace. Russian TV cut from the Canadian airwaves. Chinese TV was kept, by the way, though. A number of economic sanctions against Russia have been imposed by Canada. It was only recently and reticently, though, that Prime Minister Trudeau announced a ban of Russian crude oil imports. I mean, most Canadians didn't even know that Canada imported Russian petrochemical products in the first place. Canada is among one of the top oil and gas producers on earth. Why would we be shipping oil from such a distant source as Russia into our country? So in reality, the amount of oil coming from Russia isn't much. Canada apparently hasn't brought in any crude products from Russia in a couple of years. And they bring in some refined products from Russia that amount to actually about $1 million a day. The gesture of the oil ban is a good one, all the same, even if it doesn't really mean much. It's not going to bring Russia to its knees. But if the Russian oil ban doesn't really impact Canadians much, why did Trudeau drag his feet so much in doing it? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The Trudeau government doesn't want Canadians realizing how dependent the country is on importing petrochemical products from foreign sources. Maybe if enough Canadians realized when they fill their car up for their morning commute, they're supporting nations with appalling human rights records, such as Saudi Arabia, Algeria, Nigeria, Angola, and Venezuela. If you look it up, those are some of the top ones that ship oil to Canada. And Canadians might start asking some questions that make the government uncomfortable if they start realizing that. I think a lot of people are in blissful ignorance on this. They just don't want to know where it comes from. Just keep the price down and let me get to work. So the Canadian government's been working under an ideological delusion for years now that we can transition into a green world of renewable energy if only we could shut off enough of our own domestic supplies. The government's been very successful in shutting off Canadian supplies of oil and gas. They've not managed to find that mythical source of green energy yet, however, so foreign imports of oil from dictatorships keep rising. The proposed Energy East pipeline that would have fed Western Canadian energy products to Eastern Canada, we had that, but Trudeau regulated it to death. The Northern Gateway pipeline would have helped Canada export oil to countries that are dependent on Russian oil right now. But Trudeau killed that one. The Trans Mountain pipeline expansion could have increased those exports as well. But Trudeau regulated it to near death and then bought it with tax dollars, and it remains languishing half-built right now while the costs go through the roof. I really am starting to doubt it will ever be done. We could be exporting LNG, which is liquid natural gas, to other nations. Canada has some of the largest natural gas deposits on Earth. But while many LNG export terminals have been proposed, the Trudeau government has killed all but one of them through regulations. And that one is delayed, over budget, and the pipeline being built to service it has been dogged by protests and acts of eco-terrorism that the federal government has been loath to address. President Biden killed the Keystone XL pipeline despite billions of Canadian dollars being invested into it, and Trudeau just shrugged when that happened. Biden's now in the hopeless position of trying to defend Russian oil imports into the United States. He could have said there was a bunch coming from Canada, but those idiots shut it down. Trudeau could be making a strong case right now for the revitalization of the project, but he's still silent. In a war where economic sanctions are one of the strongest weapons, an energy superpower can be well placed to influence the world for the better. But Canada has blunted that ability as it consistently shuts down its own domestic energy production ability while becoming increasingly dependent on foreign supplies. When Alberta Premier Jason Kenney pointed out how Western Canada is poised to fill these energy voids, he was dismissed by Eastern politicians and legacy media members as being a cold opportunist who wants to take advantage of the war in Ukraine. The Laurentian elite in Canada wants to shut down all discussion of developing Western Canadian resources, no matter how much it makes sense to do so. They're driven by ideology rather than reality. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has had the side effect of exposing how ridiculously dependent the world has become upon Russian sources of energy. Europe is in a full-out energy crisis as they realize shutting down their own forms of energy generation in favor of Russian sources has left them vulnerable. Canada could have eased that dependency had we only been allowed to develop our own energy infrastructure. We have to force the federal government into addressing domestic energy supplies, no matter how squeamish it seems to make them. There's no better time than right now to work to end the absurd and costly domestic energy embargo that we've put upon ourselves. We don't need to be buying energy products from dictatorships, nor do we need to be paying record prices to fill up our own cars. We have it all right here. We just need the federal government to get out of the damn way so we can develop it. And that's what's got me triggered today. So let's get to our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what's got him triggered today.
Hey, Cory.
Good to see you, Dave.
Hey, Cory. You know what's got me triggered is that we don't have the downtown to ourselves anymore. I mean, through the fog of this morning, there's nothing but traffic and nowhere to park. Yeah, that's got me triggered.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good and a bad thing. We got spoiled with all that desolate downtown, but it is nice seeing people coming back to work and get a little closer to normal again.
It is. I think those of us who kept coming downtown should get preferred parking spots. So
absolutely. We held the fort.
Exactly, we did. What's making news this morning for us? Well, you remember the fiasco of the Phoenix pay system. Well, it's going roughly when the feds are having to bring in consultants to fix the work of their first consultants. So we have a story on that. NDP says the feds spend $12 billion a year on consultants. So if I'd have known that, I may have taken a different line of work. I may have been retired by now. A couple of stories involving Ottawa Carleton MP Pierre Poilievre, currently the only announced candidate for the Conservative leadership campaign. He's got his gun sights set on Trudeau this morning, blaming the Prime Minister for the Bank of Canada interest rate hike that was announced this morning. That's going to affect a lot of Canadians, making things more expensive. He's also talking about energy, your favorite topic, and urging Trudeau to get out of the way and let a couple of East Coast energy developments get built so that they can start shipping products to Europe and other places. Under the category of the bleeding obvious, we have a study out on the federal civil service and the majority of them say that nepotism and cronyism is rife in the civil service. So that doesn't come as shocking news to anybody. My favorite story of the day is the Liberals. They're giving free snowmobiles away to people in the Arctic. It's an effort to help the Inuit with hunting and picking berries. So they're spending millions of dollars a year sending snow machines up to the Arctic. So I'm sure they're having fun riding around on them. And our real estate guy, Mike Thomas, checks in. I've mentioned the interest rate hike of this morning. Yesterday was the busiest day in 18 years for Calgary realtors, they are saying. People specifically trying to buy condominiums before the interest rate hike took effect. So looks like the real estate market in Calgary will be booming, or at least was booming for one day yesterday, Cory. Coming up, we sent our intrepid Mel Risden to the mall last night to take a look and just see how many people are wearing masks and how many aren't. So she's going to be filing a first person column on that shortly, and lots of other good stuff, I'm sure.
Great. Well, always lots to keep everybody busy, and it's all back on the site, westernstandardonline.com. So thanks for checking in. I hope you are going to sneak out early. I think it's just because you want to try and find a better parking space, but you're saying it's automotive work.
And, yeah, I got to take my car to the car doctor. So if I'm having to be fight for a parking space, I need it to be ramming tough.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Cory.
Great. So yes, just that reminder to everybody, we've got it there. It's behind a paywall. Yes, indeed. But hey, you get a free trial for 2 weeks at westernstandardonline.com/membership. It's $10 a month. Less than that if you take it out for a year. It's $100 a year. Or if you use the code TRIGGERED when you go in there, you'll get another $10 off on that. So, I mean, risk-free, try it out. It's the best $10 a month you'll spend, honest. I mean, 95% of people, when they take the trial, they keep it going because they realize it's like a newspaper subscription in the past. It's not that expensive, and it's well worth it. So get on there, use Triggered, take out a subscription if you haven't already. Buy a subscription for a friend. Hey, send one to your crazy left-wing Uncle Larry, on his behalf. That'll work him up, and maybe it'll drive some common sense into him, too. So, yeah, I appreciate, those who have sponsored us. That's what's and subscribe. That's what keeps us rolling. And, if you haven't already, get in there because that's where all those stories come up. So people talk about the status of Tamara Leach. We're watching that closely. If we hear news on what's going on, we'll let you know. She has a bail hearing today. For those not familiar, she's the political prisoner who's been sitting without bail for 2 weeks now in jail. Because she was one of the organizers of the truckers' convoy protest. I mean, it's absurd. They brought her in shackles into the courtroom today. The judge actually said, take those shackles off her. And they've gone on with the hearings. I guess they've adjourned for lunch. This is a long time for what should be just a bail hearing. We let murderers out on bail, guys. She's charged with mischief. So, yeah, that's why I'm calling her a political prisoner, not just a regular run-of-the-mill case here. Was it Carol Bergman-Sundberg asking about Bill S-233? Yeah, that's a Senate bill. It stinks, but, Senate bills really tend not to go anywhere. They're more like when you look at City Hall or others, they like to make a motion, make noise, but they don't actually do anything with it. So I don't like the bill, but I'm not too worried about it. I don't believe it's going to lead to further troubles. We got a lot of things that are going to lead to further troubles for us in the future here, but that is not one of them, thankfully. Getting back to mainstream media, that's going to be a lot of the theme today, cancel culture and censorship. And some of it, too, is just in the coverage and balance. Melanie's going to be talking about what she saw when she went out last night because Alberta's now into day 2 without masks, without regulations. I mean, we still got a lot of regulations, but the vast majority of them are gone. And with what she saw out there, well, CTV, I mean, again, I like to talk about it because I torture myself at night while I eat supper. It's just a weight loss thing, right? I can lose my appetite watching mainstream media. And they did their streeters, so they went out and they interviewed people on the streets on day 1 without masks and asked them how they felt about it. And lo and behold, everybody they talked to was, well, I'm going to keep my mask on. I think it's a good idea. I don't think it's time for people to unmask yet. Yeah, no, I'm afraid. I'm really afraid. This is a way that the media manipulates the messaging. And I'll admit, I went out, I did some shopping for groceries last night. I'd say the vast majority in that store were masked. People were masked. But you know what? If it's their choice, I don't care. Go for it. Wear a mask. It doesn't bother me any. but a lot of them weren't. If you're going to do an honest streeter and get out and have a look around, why did they not even find one person? And don't try and tell me there isn't one that they could find, say, oh, it's so nice getting out without a mask. It's been able to smile at people. I've been able to look around and not breathe my own wretched breath. Though, I mean, that's an argument for dental hygiene, but that's a separate case. But you know what I mean? They didn't even try to get balance. Apparently, everybody in the city is quite horrified with being unmasked, and they're going to remain with masks if you believe the mainstream media. So, no, we aren't the mainstream. We don't intend to be. Though some people have already accused us of being too far that way already. I assure you guys, that's not where we land. We're just getting bigger. Doesn't mean mainstream. Big difference. So I'm going to be getting to our next guest soon. He's in the lobby, but I do want to talk as well. You know, it's not just subscribers that keep us rolling, though I really appreciate it, and we've been doing great with them, but sponsors. And we advertise products so that we can pay those bills, get more reporters, and keep coming up with that great content that we do. One of those sponsors is Bitcoin Well. These guys have been sponsoring us for some time. And, you know, when we talk about this crazy world and not being certain about currencies, the security of your money, the things you've worked so hard for, well, Bitcoin Well is a company and they're a Western Canadian company. They're right out here in the West. You can deal one-on-one with real people, not some distant call center, and they'll walk you through the process if you want to get involved in Bitcoin. It's non-custodial and it's safe, which means you always have control of the money. You know, some of those companies, people worry and they hear about scams where they gave their money to a company and the company vanishes. You don't give your money to Bitcoin Well. They just help you buy it. And then that money is yours. That currency, that digital currency, that remains yours and you always control it. May be for you, it may not be for you. But what I like about Bitcoin Well is they are a site that helps you because, I mean, it's a new thing and they walk you through the steps and so you can decide for yourself if that's what you want for yourself and your money. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They've been a great sponsor. They provide a good service. I get part of my pay now in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Well facilitates that. They got corporate packages as well. So check them out, and thank you, people, for looking at our sponsors. This is Jesus in the Mist. How does Bitcoin work if war takes down the internet? Well, if the whole internet gets taken down, the status of our Bitcoin is going to be the least of our concerns, I'm afraid. As it sits, though, you get actually, and that's how Bitcoin Well explains some things. You get a cold wallet. You're not it's not stored on the internet. You actually have a hard device that holds your Bitcoin for you. And they talk to you about how you can secure that, how you can convert that into purchases and things such as that, and utilize it. So they can explain a lot of those things to you. I mean, your Bitcoin wouldn't vanish if the internet got shut down for a little while or something like that. It's nothing of that sort. So, but either way, like I said, check them out. They can answer those questions even better than I can. And they provide a really good service. And I love Western Canadian real companies. So I'm going to bring on lawyer Derek Fromm, and we're going to talk a little bit of legal stuff, but then go beyond some of the usual lawyerly stuff that comes out in these interviews as well. So let's bring him into the studio virtually here. Anyways, hey, Derek, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Oh, good. I mean, day 2 without a mask, right? Or at least, well, I didn't wear a lot anyways, but I don't have to anymore.
Yeah, that's nice. Not having to worry about it when you walk in someplace, who's judging you, and well, they can judge me. I wouldn't have cared anyway. But
well, that's it. And people can potentially, of those few viewers I've got, recognize me and judge me when I go out in public, anyways. And it's usually negative. But now I can at least, they can address me face to face and tell me to get stuffed or whatever.
That's
they
right.
want to. So I enjoy those interactions. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we'll start just quickly with the legal part before we get on to the musical half of our episode here. We had an email you were talking about. I mean, Melanie interviewed somebody on that recently too. But just to reiterate, a really striking court ruling from the Ontario Superior Court on a case. It was one of the parents wanted to get the child vaccinated, one of the parents didn't. And it wasn't just that the judge ruled in favor of the parent who wanted to choose not to vaccinate, but the writing in the ruling was really something. That judge kind of went above and beyond to speak about the whole tone of things. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, it's actually really exciting to find a case like that. Normally, I think judges, they just kind of get to the point and don't spend a lot of time worrying about how well written the decision is in terms of prose. They just try to convey what their reasoning is. But here we have an example of a judge who I would say feels deeply enough about this topic and has thought about it enough that he actually put some effort into how he expressed his reasoning. And it's quite a striking introduction. So the introduction to this decision, if if your viewers have read court decisions before, usually it's like a laundry list of who did what to whom and when they did it. But this is, let me just read this. This is how this goes.
Yeah, it's great.
When did it become illegal to ask questions, especially in a courtroom? When did it become unfashionable for judges to receive answers, especially when children's lives are at stake? How did we lower our guards and let the words unacceptable beliefs get paired together? Fascinating. I think that's a quote from someone we know. And is misinformation even a real word? Or has it become a crass, self-serving tool, that preempts scrutiny to discredit your opponent? So is it a trump card just to cast aspersions? Well, it's very fascinating because the judge goes through this, and what had happened in this case is the two parents were otherwise good parents, but they were either separated or divorced, and they were having a dispute whether or not their 10-year-old and their 12-year-old children should be vaccinated. The 14-year-old had made the decision on, I can't remember if it was a daughter or a son, but the 14-year-old made a decision independent of the parents and chose to be vaccinated, which the dad was in favor of. The mom said, okay, I'm not in favor of the vaccination, but you're 14, you make your own decision. Now, with the 12 and 10-year-old who were living with the mother, she had custody of the two of them. She wanted them to be able to make their own decision as well. But the father said, no, they should be vaccinated. This is a very serious disease. We can't have them spreading the disease around, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what the court did is the court actually applied the law as it is. The court did its duty. Though this is not new law. This is not changing anything. This is just reestablishing what we've all should have known was the case throughout the pandemic, and that is this. When a court is looking at doing something as extraordinary as demanding a child who has charter rights inject something into their body, maybe we should ask the kids what they want. Novel. Because the law is that what is done has to be done in the best interests of the child. And certainly a portion of what it means to be done in the best interest of the child is to actually reference what the child wants. And so the court did that. There was a psychologist that had been working with the children for a number of years because of the family breakdown. And the psychologist clearly said, look, the parents aren't having undue influence over the children's decisions here. They're both otherwise good parents. They just it was just an unlivable situation for them. So there wasn't any poisoning going on. The children were mature enough to understand the decision that they were making. And, if you look at it, children really aren't at risk of COVID. So there's that. There's the fact that when you vaccinate, you can still spread the disease. So the judge was both assured that the judge wasn't sending these children away to die. The judge also was assured that, look, I'm not sending these children out in the community to kill other people as well, because the vaccination would make little difference on that front. And on top of it, the children already had COVID and had recovered, and they had demonstrated their natural immunity. So the judge was like, I can't see a reason to vaccinate. And the mother had brought this evidence that she found online, but she brought evidence from Dr. Malone, from the CDC, even from Pfizer, the trial data, which showed, there are complications in some cases with the vaccine. She brought that to court, but the father's evidence was basically amounted to, well, that's conspiracy theorist. She's wearing a tinfoil hat. There's pictures of her hanging around with Maxine Bernier at political events. And the judge read the father the riot act, not because he's a bad person, but because he didn't present evidence. He thought it was enough to say, your theories have been debunked. That's discredited. Well, the government says that it's safe and effective. And the court said, that's not evidence, that's argument. And if you can turn to to paragraph 67, it's brilliant that you have it there. Paragraph 67 is a wonderful paragraph. In times of uncertainty like what we have right now, where we're looking at the Pfizer trial data and the warning labels on the vaccines, and there are risks. This is not a risk-free procedure. Yet the government is saying safe and effective. Is that evidence? Well, no, it's not, because has the government ever been wrong before?
Yeah, we were just talking about their payroll system with the Phoenix. What is it, 25 years they've been working on that? They can't even get their paychecks right.
That's right. It's
I
been
don't
a
know, we
long
would
time.
trust them
Yeah,
with medical
yeah.
opinions.
So, in paragraph 67, look at this. It's sterilization. It's, there we go, in C. What about internment camps? What about thalidomide? The government gets things wrong. Of course, it's safe and effective according to the government, but they're not always right. You have to bring evidence. Just saying debunked, yelling conspiracy theory, and saying the other side is anti-science, that's not enough in court any longer.
Yeah, well, it was good that he spoke up on, how that was where the attempt was made to make a political association a factor in this, and that's a dangerous road to go down.
Yeah.
For him to slap it down so fairly in that, again, it's not saying he likes or dislikes the PPC. He's just saying it's irrelevant, and we don't bring that in here. That's not where we want to go. The deeper issue is that this gentleman felt that he was making a case by doing that, and it shows the atmosphere going around Canada right now, which is distressing. Yeah, but all the same, it's something. So for people that who want to get the whole thing, and maybe email me, I can send you a link to where the ruling is. It's a long thing. It's from Canley online, I believe, and send an email to me at cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com, and I'll send you a link so you can read the whole ruling, because usually court rulings are pretty boring and dry to read. That's why we pay guys like Derek to deal with it. But in this case, it's actually quite an engaging read, and it's in my view, a bit inspiring to know that there's still some people on the bench who take that job very seriously on adjudicating and ruling and trying to keep fact in the courtroom.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'll bounce on to another area now where we're talking about censorship and oddness. So a lot of people might not know this, but you've been part of a heavy metal band for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, I got a picture to Nico to show my credentials to speak to this sort of thing. I cut my teeth on Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Crocus and some of those, Saxon, some of those earlier heavy metal bands in the more distant past. But I had the hair, I had the single earring, and of course all the black T-shirts to support my case at that. So I am coming from a position of authority on this subject.
Yes, yes.
But you were talking also, so your band, though, recently put out a video on YouTube and a number of things, as bands will do. And it was pretty contemporary. You had the footage of the protests and showed some Tiananmen Square comparisons, and it got censored.
Yeah, it did. It was fascinating. Yeah. So we recorded this song and wanted to do a video for it to announce that we had a new vocalist. And we're a death metal band, so I'm kind of tired of doing the vocals myself. It always gives me a headache. And I'm kind of a wimp now that I'm old. So we have a new vocalist, and we recorded this song, which was written by a Jewish guitarist, and that's relevant, as you'll see, a Jewish guitarist from Montreal named Ari Eichmann. And Ari wrote this song for a band named Quo Vadis about 20 years ago. And I've been told since that time has transpired that what the song is actually about is about the Jewish ghettos in Poland in World War II. And it's a song called I Believe. And it struck me after Jason Kenney's cohorts arrested a few pastors in the province last year, that this was an appropriate song and somewhat relevant to Alberta. So we decided, let's record this song. This will be like the test run of our new vocalist, Nick. And so finally, when it came time to put the video together, the lyric video, just to tell our 10 fans about Nick's joining of the band, we decided, hey, let's use some of the trucker protest video footage. And so we sent our video guy a couple of, we sent him all YouTube footage. So it's footage from news services, and it's all drawn from YouTube. So there's Tiananmen Square, as you say, and then it kind of morphs into like more contemporary with the truckers waving Canadian flags, driving past crowds of people at Perimeter Highway in Winnipeg, and having a good time in front of the Parliament buildings in Ottawa. So it's very fascinating. So we recorded this song. I uploaded it, the video, to YouTube. And the vocalist, when he went to share it, he noticed, well, actually, there's 3 comments on the video, but they've disappeared, and comments have been disabled. So logged into the account and like, oh, the video's now been rated as +18. No idea why. I mean, it's death metal, but people under the age of 18 listen to our style of music. And certainly no reason, there's no swearing, there's no graphic violence in the lyrics, any violence in the protesters of protests. It's all footage drawn directly from YouTube. Often we actually intentionally left the news source logo in the corner. And so you can see, oh, this is from Global News. Oh, this is from Rebel. This is from, whatever news source it is. And so what ended up happening is over the next few days, YouTube then not only disabled the comments, gave it an 18+ rating, but then now have subsequently deleted the video, just removed it from the website because it promotes violence against children and families, which is absolutely, hey, there's my picture. Absolutely ludicrous. Like, it's not even possible that it's that way. But my vocalist Nick, he was right from the beginning. He said, it's going to get censored because it's going to get cast. It's going to be assumed to be anti-vax, just like the truckers. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we're not taking an anti-vax position like the truckers. We're taking an anti-mandate position, which is individualism, individual autonomy. And that's really what we're after in the video. And so we're thinking now of taking a step back, getting the video remade with 100% trucker footage and show them like sitting in hot tubs, kids on bouncy castles, maybe even kneeling and praying, like all this stuff, happy people doing happy stuff. Yeah, and we'll see how they decide it's against YouTube standards now. And you see, there you go. There's a logo in the corner, RT, and this was all footage drawn from YouTube. So it's censored when it's paired with a message that says individualism good and individual autonomy good and persecution of the individual bad. When that footage is paired with that lyric message, YouTube doesn't like it. It's violence against children somehow.
Yeah, and it's just getting absurd, and as Claudette was saying, put it on Rumble. Actually, it already is. That's where this is from. Same sort of thing. If you want to email me, I can send you a link to that as well. As you said, that's death metal. It's more of a different kind of vocals than I listen to with my old metal, but it's to a lot of people's enjoyment, certainly. And again, I mean, you handing it off. I mean, if Rob Halford can still hit those notes today, I don't see why you can't still do it right now.
Yeah. We'll leave people to decide what notes can be hit when they listen to the song.
Yeah, but you talked about some of the other stuff with, I mean, the origins of heavy metal, the roots of it. I mean, it's an anti-establishment sort of music. It's pushing back against authority. Yep. That's why there was such a strong development of it in East Germany or even in the Eastern Europe. I mean, back in the 80s, that's where a lot of great stuff came out of because that was their means of expression. And, like any expression, it should be protected.
That's right. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Heavy metal is just an example of avant-garde art, let's say. And I will defend that term art in this context. But it's that sort of fringe boundary where it's outside the norm. That's where actual commentary still happens. You don't get social commentary by picking up a Christina Aguilera, whoever CD, or sad to say, some of the Canadian mainstays, like the Tragically Hip, you're not going to get stunning commentary on society from bands like that. But when you get out into the fringes, into more esoteric, and that goes for visual arts, painting, for novels, everything. It's when you get out to that, that's when you get actual commentary. And so heavy metal has always been an individual opposed to society. That's why you see such anti-establishment imagery involved in the genre so often. Like you see anti-religious, anti-state, and the same thing for punk and for hard rock. And this is not only incidental to the genre; it's absolutely necessary. It forms part of the message. You can't write a hardcore punk song that goes, rah, rah, everything's okay, the state is wonderful, it'll take care of me. That the message would not fit the medium.
No, and Oh, I was just going to say, and it's not a left-right thing. I mean, if you look at Rage Against the Machine, for example, I mean, they're very left-leaning, but they're raging against the establishment. I mean, almost as it's in their name. Or Pantera, you know, vulgar display of power. They're pushing back, and it's not necessarily even a simple political ideology. It's people, young people often express just a means to say they're not content with the status quo, and it's been important.
Yeah, and that's very important. Like in my band, Sympathy, we don't all agree on these issues. But the one thing we do agree on is that we're not status quo people. And we are somewhat, to a degree, outsiders. And we view ourselves that way in opposition, I guess you could say, or in contrast with what the status quo is. And so, I mean, just to put this to bed, I mean, there's people in my band that I think all of us have received vaccines. I don't know that. I would never even dream of asking about that. So it's ludicrous to say that we're anti-vax.
Yeah.
And also it's ludicrous to say we're promoting violence against children.
Yeah, well, and again, it's the quelling of discourse. It's trying to get groupthink going on. What is it, Belinda bringing up Megadeth? Yeah, that's one of the ones from my youth too. Yeah, peace sells. But again, they were talking about issues and things such as that. But in a way that people enjoy through music, and it's an art form, as you said, just like other visual arts or written art. Right? I mean, again, look back to Neil Young when he sang about Kent State. You know, the establishment didn't want to hear about that. They didn't want your average listener to, realize that university protesters got gunned down. And I'm sure a lot of people would have loved to have censored him at that time.
Yeah.
We just don't want to go down this road, and it's a forgotten area. Well, just because it's death metal, we should just ignore it. Well, no, this is a artistic expression that we really should be protecting.
Yeah, it is. It is a commentary, and I think and the dovetail back to the court decision. It's that sort of shutting off of debate, and not to say that social debate needs to happen in the context of death metal, because that would be a very poor way to have a debate. But it's indicative of a problem we have in society where our first reflex is to cancel. And I mean, that was the father's problem in that court decision, is his reflex was not to bring evidence, but to seek to cancel his wife's opinions. And that's exactly what's happened to me and my band with YouTube, is instead of actually being able to judge the content, I'm assuming it was more than an algorithm at the point where they delete. Someone probably viewed it, and their reflex was to cancel. And that's a sad state, because it's sort of impoverished. And I always think back to something that Christopher Hitchens said before he died, is that he made an observation that there's this idea in Canada about, well, it wasn't Canada in particular, but of multiculturalism, that it was such a wonderful thing. I wouldn't say that it's not, but what it's become is very different than actual multiculturalism. His point was that it's a very surface thing. It's like, well, I can go buy a curry down the street in London, or I can go to a Chinese restaurant. People's notion is multiculturalism is different types of food and the clothes you wear. But if we have actual diversity of opinion, well, that's too much. Long as we all believe the same thing and think exactly the same thing, we can eat different foods and dress differently. That's great. That's Canada. That's super. No, multiculturalism has to mean more than that. It has to also mean diversity of opinion and a diversity of views. It has to go below the surface. It has to be much more. We can't be canceling other people, because that means we're only more impoverished in our own views when we do that. And it's a sad reflex. It's pathetic.
It is. Diversity through conformity, as ridiculous as that statement is, that's where they're trying to go with it. And it's an absurdity. At least we're in an incredible time, that, hey, YouTube can shut you down, but you're springing up over on Rumble. And, we are getting more and more means of getting it out, no matter how much the state and others, the social media giants, want to play whack-a-mole and keep a singular message going on out there. It still leaks out the sides. And people who would participate in something like heavy metal or some of the hard rock or punk, they're not going to let themselves get shut down by these little efforts either. So I appreciate you guys pushing on, and some others were saying they're looking forward to your your remastered video, if that's what you do. And just that reminder then, so your band's name Sympathy, you're on Rumble, and where else can we find what you're doing legally and stuff like that before I let you go?
Well, you can also find the band on Bandcamp, And we have a few releases up there. It's you can take a listen. You can also catch me often in the Western Standard, on Twitter also, Derek James Fromm. I say too much and have too many opinions and share them too freely. I just don't care anymore. And I'm at Warnock Craft Anderson in Airdrie, where I'm practicing law.
Right on. Well, good to see you again, Derek. And yeah, it was an interesting discussion. So, you know, it's we can mix politics with music and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Great. So I'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. So yes, that was Derek Fromm, lawyer, death metal, former singer extraordinaire, guitars, the whole works. And yeah, check out that picture online with that hair. He's got those ones in his past too. So it was a good talk. And again, I mean, as you're saying, it's that first instinct. The instincts, I don't like that, shut it down. Well, hang on. You don't like it, don't listen. Let it go. But that's not where we are. We're at this centralized area of thought that this person's associated there, thus we have to shut down their voice. This person addressed that, thus we have to shut them down. This is not a good development in society. This is not moving forward as people. This is not healthy. And it goes all the way down, all the way from the top on, you know, extremely important court hearings with families, all the way down to again, expression through things like bands, or as Derek said, I mean, art pieces, artists throughout history. I mean, we're talking to medieval times, were people who helped inspire change and inspire different thinking. And, you know, you can't shut it down. It's bad for society. So I'm going to go to an ad break here before I talk about some more new stuff. Let's talk about the Canada Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of freedoms, speaking of things that the government doesn't want us to have, they do not want you to have, enjoy, trade, collect firearms. You know, most of us, well, I don't know, a lot of people, millions of Canadians safely, responsibly enjoy firearms all the time, whether they're hunting, target shooting, collecting, it doesn't matter. As long as they're not harming anybody else, it's nobody's business what they do with the firearms. Well, the Canada Shooting Sports Association, I mean, their name says it all. They're an association for the people who enjoy firearms and to give you the means to enjoy them and resources, everything from trade shows to videos on safe handling of firearms. And I like to think most importantly is they have got court challenges out there. They're standing up on behalf of firearm owners. They're pushing back against the Liberal government because the government's trying to take these away. And you need to join them. You see, nobody else is going to stand up for you as a firearms owner. You got to stand up for yourself. And these guys need members. Get on there, check them out, take out a membership so they can keep helping you keep your firearms. It's a Canadian Shooting Sports Association. It's easiest just to Google it and find it, but their website also is CSSA-CILA.org. And yeah, you know, support those guys, take out a membership. It's important. All right. So let's talk about, you know, we're going to be on the pipeline this afternoon, by the way, with Derek Fildebrand. And I think we're going to have Melanie because Dave, as he said, had to get his car repaired. We're going to talk about some of the stuff in Ukraine. Let's talk about some of the nuanced discussion we've seen online going on already. Kamala Harris, the American vice president. This is a quote from her. This is the discourse level at the top levels of government in the United States right now. Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong. You sound like a female Trudeau. I'm surprised this wasn't put into a pop-up book. Who are you talking to? I mean, what a condescending, shallow. I mean, we're talking about a potential world war going on. We got a nuclear power invading a European nation, and you talk like an imbecile. And this is the, you know, as Dave put it the other day, you know, as people say, one breath away from the presidency. And I mean, Biden. Well, I guess if anybody wants to make sure Biden remains healthy and as cognitively capable as possible, there's another reason for it. Because if for some reason he's not the president, that's what we've got. Look at that. North America will have Justin Trudeau at the head over here and Kamala Harris down there in the United States. What a frightening thought. Again, especially in a world going on right now with turmoil. Let's see what else we got going on the news scroll. You know, something going on. I've been watching City Council. I'm going to be interviewing Sonia Sharp in the future here, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff there. She's been a very impressive councillor, actually. Most definitely her own person. Some people kind of thought everybody with a union endorsement is going to toe the line for the unions, do things like that. No, she's been actually very outspoken and nuanced, and is most definitely her own person when it comes to policies and things. So that's refreshing out of City Hall and councillors. And something we got now kind of ripening up into a battle, and I'm a little torn on it, is Jason Kenney and the UCP are looking to amend the Municipalities Act. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Maybe they should amend it just to make it shorter so I can pronounce it on the shows properly. So that municipal governments can't keep things like mask mandates or vaccine passports and things such as that on the go. And I'm kind of mixed. I don't like when I see the more distant central government coming down on the localized government. At the same time, I don't like seeing localized government overriding the health authorities and doing things that are outside of their jurisdiction. So this is actually a little more complicated than one would think. I mean, most of why Sohi and Gondek didn't want to go off of the mandates and things like that in the past is it's about control. And it's about having a pissing match with the premier. I mean, they're fighting back and forth. They just want to make sure they have that ability. But at the same time, how often do you want the provincial government to override your local one? I hate to say it, but what if we had Premier Notley again? Do you want her in charge of development in your area or region? Do you want her to override your locally elected officials? So we're getting into some difficult waters going on there right now. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that Sohi and Edmonton is keeping a mask mandate going on while the rest of the province doesn't have one. It's a punitive measure against not just the people there, but the businesses. Think about the people who own businesses anywhere around the periphery of Edmonton. You've got satellite cities all the way around that city. Shoppers will, and I know they will. I've done it. They will leave the area to go shop unmasked. They will leave the area to go dine where they don't have to put a chin diaper on to go to the bathroom. They'll do it. And it's going to hurt their local businesses that have already been hurting enough over this whole bloody pandemic from start to end. So, I mean, it's a stupid, stupid decision on the part of Edmonton's council and mayor, and a bad one. But at the same time, how much do we want the provincial government to be the ones to come in and crack down on it? It's tough. I mean, and I look at the same thing, when Gondek keeps going on, the government should intervene and pull Sean Chu out of the council in Calgary. They should rip him out of there. Okay. Do you really want the premier to do that? We don't like this elected official, so we're going to just rip them out of there. And we don't like that one, so we're just going to pull them out. Are you sure you want that, Gondek? Maybe the premier won't like you. It defeats the purpose of having a local election. And I know there's a lot of controversy with Sean Chu, and it should be up to the electors to deal with that, not the Alberta government. I'm not saying whether Sean should be there or not. Again, that decision, though, should land on the people of Ward 4. And maybe if Kenney actually brought in real recall legislation, that decision could be brought to them sooner rather than later. But for the time being, I don't think Gondek really, this shows how two-faced she is. She's upset if Kenney's going to bring in that legislation. But at the same time, she wants Kenney to overstep and move in on removing elected officials that she doesn't like. So we just got to be careful with policy, got to be careful with authority. You want to watch. I like government to be as close to people as possible. But at the same time, I don't want city council to be in charge of healthcare in general. I mean, look at those guys. They're a bunch of morons. They could barely run their own meetings as it sits. There's a few bright lights in there, but for the most part, these guys do idiot things. I don't want them in charge of our healthcare system. They can barely get the snow off our streets or to pick the garbage up on time. So politics, eh? I mean, maybe if Kenney coupled his thing with a regional plan, like something for regional responses if the pandemic was going to keep going. I remember an area that Drew Barnes, before he got kicked out of caucus even, was very strong in. He was pointing out that, well, if we look at the numbers, infections, hospitalizations, Medicine Hat had very, very few when the province was locked down. But I mean, in the bigger cities and some other areas, it was getting strong, but Medicine Hat was okay. And he was saying, well, why don't you lift the regulations here in Medicine Hat for us then? I mean, maybe that could make it a little more understandable. You can address certain areas rather than having a central government do the same thing across the entire province. That's a better way to govern, reflect regional realities and views and things such as that. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, cabinet yesterday, they faced demands that target Russian investors in Canada, including billionaire owners of a federally subsidized Regina steel mill, once toured by Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Let's see what this Liberal-appointed senator said. Punishing Russia for its invasion of Ukraine may involve some sacrifice for us, said the Liberal-appointed senator. situation calls for Canada to do everything it can. This is Brett Cotter in Saskatchewan. He raised the need for the imposition of sanctions on Russian businesses in Canada, not just freezing their bank accounts. Okay, so this is where things start getting challenging as well and difficult, as you can see with the graphic that Nico brought up. We do want to push back. We do want to, exert what we can against the Russian, invasion going on over there. But at the same time, how much damage do we want to do to ourselves? And I'm not worried so much even about the owners of this facility. And it sounds like it took some subsidies from the tax dollars as it is. So we're stuck owning it already, which we shouldn't be doing in the first place. But there are going to be a lot of people put out of work if we start shutting down those businesses that are interspersed with foreign ownership. So tread carefully, I guess, is all I could say to that. Make sure you watch your policies. Don't do knee-jerk things. And we're seeing a lot of knee-jerk governance going on in Canada these days in general. In the question period there, was it Cotter specifically named Evraz? It's a publicly traded steel pipe manufacturer. It's got mills and facilities in Regina, Calgary, Red Deer, and Camrose. So very western. It's the largest steel maker west of the Great Lakes. So how many Canadians are you willing to put out of work, though, with these sanctions? And maybe we should. I don't know. I'm not saying this is a good idea or a bad idea at this point. I'm just saying this is where policy isn't as cut and dry as a lot of people think. As I kind of said earlier, economic sanctions are really the only power we've got at this point as a nation. We don't have the military forces to be able to do much to push Russia, and we don't want to. Would you really want to send Canadian forces into Ukraine right now? Of course not. I mean, not only would that turn that from a conflict between two nations into a military one between a number of them, but I don't think we want to see our young Canadians going over there and potentially dying for this, even if we're concerned. So, we're in a complicated period of world policy, whilst we unfortunately have some simplistic leadership. And, getting to Kamala Harris and Justin Trudeau and the concerns about them right now, I just hope that the smarter minds can prevail. I hope both of them are handing off the diplomatic roles to people who are better in that, who are a little better educated and can think a little better on their feet than those two. Because if those two baboons are the ones, please don't misinterpret what I was saying with that. I meant more of clowns, are the ones making those policies over there. We're going to be in for a world war at the rate they go. I mean, let's talk about stupid government policy here right now. Wait a minute. Let's see. Here we go with Gary saying Russia's on the right side of history. Okay, we can have this debate with viewers, and I've heard a bit of that from people. Guys, they invaded Ukraine. There's no right side there. You can have legitimate beefs with Ukraine. You can have sanctions with Ukraine. You can even talk about the little regions on the side. But no, they are not on the right side of history. They're invading what was a peaceful, sovereign nation. It's not the right side of history. This is expansionist. This is what leads to world wars. This is the problem. I mean, Hitler was bad enough with his own country until he popped on into Poland. And then we started to get a much bigger problem. And of course, he kept expanding from there. And they are certainly not on the right side of history. And no, there's no excuse for Russia going into Ukraine. And people say, there was corruption going on in Ukraine. Well, probably. Well, that's pretty common in Eastern Europe, unfortunately. I saw a lot of that when I was over there. As well, I mean, they were saying, we've got some neo-Nazi movements. Well, again, unfortunately, when you get millions of people, you're going to get a handful of those kind of idiots. You always do. It doesn't mean that the neighboring nation can invade and take over the nation to deal with it. I'm sure we've got some sort of chapter of neo-Nazi peckerheads somewhere in Canada. Does that mean the United States would be justified in saying we're going to come in and take over Canada to stop that? No. I'm sorry, guys. This is Putin's thing. And we're seeing Russians protesting as well. The Russian citizens aren't so terribly thrilled with this whole thing either. And I just don't. I mean, again, we can disagree, and clearly we do. That's fine. But I do not see Russia being on the right side of history in this whatsoever. NATO wasn't much of anything. What? Why so many of you guys? Ukraine's not peaceful? Really? Was Ukraine going to invade Russia? Ukraine committed genocide on the Russians living in Ukraine? BS. That's just BS. So you see, this is where I'm talking about. We've got to get on to real discussions, guys. Not this crap that's going around. And there's problems. It's a complicated area. There's definitely things. Educate myself before condemning Russia. I've been there. Have you? Been to Ukraine as well. They're complicated. Yeah, Eastern Ukraine. I think there probably is a majority of them would rather be Russian. And these are tight-knit nations next to each other. But it doesn't justify invading a peaceful country. It doesn't. So make your excuses, guys. Most of the world, and if we're talking about history, they're not supporting. You guys are supporting Putin. That's fine. If you're into dictators, go to town. I'm not. And I'm sorry, but I am not going to support the peaceful invasion, not peaceful invasion, the violent invasion of a peaceful neighbor. So let's move on to some other things. Let's talk about snowmobiles for Northerners. Speaking of government getting into areas they shouldn't. So the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations, Dave talked about that earlier, talked about free snowmobiles being purchased under a multi-million-dollar program to promote Indigenous hunting and berry picking. I spent a few years up in working in the Inuvik area in Tuktoyaktuk when I was in the oil field as well. They got a thing because a lot of people are probably, Dallas is disgusted with me. Well, go away, Dallas. So they had what's called the Rangers. I think they're still going up there. I mean, this is getting back to the Cold War days, They would give old 303s to the local natives and have them patrol the Arctic. I mean, to a degree, you didn't have the sort of modern, satellite imagery radar, things like that. So you did need the dew line. You needed people on the ground and stuff like that to keep an eye on our northern area. I don't think they could have held off a Russian invasion back then, but they could be that first warning and then first line of defense, I guess you could say up in the north and things like that. They used to give them snowmobiles for that. But I mean, that need is gone. So now they've moved on and say, well, now they need it for hunting. This is interesting. One of the problems, and I dealt with that when we were out on the ice in Tuktoyaktuk and areas like that. And we actually shared our camp with researchers because they didn't have the budget to get out there on the ice and look at things in the Arctic. But we had the budget as an oil company out there to do it. So we actually hosted them, let them come in there. There was one where they were studying seal populations out near Tuktoyaktuk, and there was this drill ship that was frozen into the ice nearby. And essentially, they'd already come up with the hypothesis saying seal populations are definitely going to be lower because the drilling up there is going to scare them away and the Beaufort Sea, and it's really going to disrupt them. And they brought these dogs up. This shows how bright they were, too. And we saw the video of it. It was sad, actually. They brought up the golden retrievers and such that they had trained to sniff out seal holes. And they'd done it through seal scent in hockey rinks and things so they could train the dog to get out and smell where there's been seals and such. And they brought them to the Arctic. I think they believe, like David Suzuki's lines and things like that, on how cold it is up there. And it's incredibly cold. You've never felt cold till you've been on the Beaufort Sea in February. I tell you, the wind never stops. We're talking a thermometer temperature where you're averaging -40. I mean, the wind chill when you put it on top of that is just obscene. I don't know how the polar bears and the ptarmigan and the Arctic foxes really managed to survive up there, but they do. Either way, the first thing that happened is a bunch of these dogs had their feet amputated because they froze their feet off when these idiots took them out there to try and find the seal holes. It was stupid. Then they went out further, and they did manage to find and check and tag some seals and everything. And what they discovered was right around the drill ship where they figured the seals were all going to be chased away and scared off. There were loads of them. In fact, there were more seals than they expected. So it blew their hypothesis. We didn't hear much about that study afterwards because it didn't come to the conclusion they wanted to hear. The other thing they discovered was there was a lot of polar bears around there. And they were shocked. Like, how do we got so many polar bears around here? Well, because polar bears eat seals, they follow the seals. But they said, yes, but we got the numbers from around Tuktoyaktuk. And this is where I'm coming around in a long way with this story here, but it's some truth to it. There are very few polar bears around Tuktoyaktuk. Well, yes. But why is that the case? It's because the locals there had snowmobiles and rifles. They've shot all the polar bears. They've hunted the seals. The numbers are down. Anywhere within snowmobile range of a center in the Arctic, you're not going to have a lot of game. Same thing with the caribou. But you get out like us, as the oil field and so on get farther beyond it, then you do see a lot of wildlife in the Arctic, in fact. And a lot of the numbers they reflect, see, all these studies can afford is to get into populated areas and check the numbers, but it gives a skewed number. If you get outside a snowmobile range, you're going to see much larger natural wildlife numbers going on out there. either way, now we're getting to this. We have to give free machines to the Inuit and so on, so they can hunt and get farther up there, I guess. And the interesting thing too is they also said to promote berry picking. Look, in berry season, snowmobiles aren't terribly handy, so they might want to research a little more on their justification for this as well. I don't want to take the snowmobiles away from people living in the Arctic. Those are essential tools for getting around, and machines and such. And at the same time, is that our obligation as taxpayers, though, to keep funding these sorts of things? I mean, we're funding a population in the deep north, and I think we got to be justifying why do we want them up there necessarily if it's unsustainable. Do you want to keep it as a permanent welfare state? Do we want to constantly fund people just to sit there? I think that's some of what people kind of keep in mind. You know, they like to envision this little zoo where First Nations people just live in this traditional lifestyle in little areas. And they, you know, the people who promote this are usually hipsters down south who like the urban modern living. They enjoy that. They wouldn't want to live up in that, but they want to make sure to fund and keep other people living up in that. Look, guys, if you've gone up there, check it out. These are houses. They aren't living in igloos anymore. Of course not. They're living in houses that are up on stilts because of the permafrost, and they rely on diesel and gas to keep themselves warm and keep their power going. Every house has a satellite dish, and they have snowmobiles. They're people like everyone else. They want comforts, and of course they should have them. So, but if you're trying to keep this mental vision that you're keeping a little enclave of traditional little Inuit people up in the north, it's not happening. I don't see. I mean, if there's not enough trade in hunting, if there's not enough benefit in it for them to pay for their own snowmobiles, maybe it's time to stop supplying them. And I'm sorry, but if you can't make it up there, maybe it's time to move down south. How long do we want to expand a population? Or if they really want to, I could have a much longer discussion on that. Get the Mackenzie Valley pipeline done. You know, part of what was going to happen with that pipeline, if it ever got finished, was it was going to come with a land road following the pipeline right away, all the way up through Yellowknife, which right now it stops at Norman Wells. And you still got about a 700 kilometer gap. And you have to get to Inuvik and Tuck, you have to drive all the way around through Whitehorse and then over the Dempster Highway. It's a beautiful drive, by the way, but it's a rugged one and a long one. You can cut a day off of that, go straight up the Mackenzie Valley and get up to Inuvik. And the pipeline was going to provide that as well. And they were training people up there. They got colleges up there. They were putting people to work who would work in the energy sector up there. But then the government regulated it to death. I mean, years and years. It started with the Berger Commission in the 70s on that pipeline. Like, there's another Alberta with the oil and gas up in the Mackenzie Delta. It's loads of it up there. I spent years on the exploration up there. And we can develop it. Speaking of energy security for Canada. But the government dragged their feet so long on that pipeline and made them study so much. We wasted billions on that thing. The company, it wasn't canceled. It was just like Energy East. All the proponents and companies just said, oh, you guys have made it so expensive. We're out. We're done. We're finished. They didn't spend all those billions thinking it was going to be canceled. They wanted to bring it in, and it would be worthwhile. It sure would be a nice pipe to have right now, wouldn't it? The price of oil and gas. And it was just going to be gas to start, but they were going to move on to liquids. But it's shut down. If you want to maintain a population in the Arctic, you have to find some industries that are worth developing. And oil and gas is a big one of them. And a lot of the people would like to work on it. They like to make a living like anybody else. What else are you going to do up there? Besides subsistence living, there's very limited tourism up there. There's no logging. If you've been up the taiga before you hit the tundra, there's no decent logging for hundreds and hundreds of miles to get up there. Fishing is limited. You know, you can get a bit of char and so on. But again, I guess more into subsistence and specialty sort of things. Hunting tours, a little bit of that. But you can't sustain much of a population up there. So rather than sending snowmobiles up there, we should be figuring out how to make them independent. And that does apply to a lot of people in isolated reserves, even if it's below the Arctic Circle. But again, the Canadian way, now let's just keep throwing more stuff out there. Let's see. Oh, here's another. The Senate's been having a lot of good discussions lately. So this is another interesting one. Materials used by the renewable energy sector are often produced by slave labor. This is the Senate Human Rights Committee. They were told this in testimonies. Forced labor, including children used in supply chains that produce electric car batteries and wind turbine parts. So, yeah, you know, again, speaking of greenwashing, you know, speaking of the hipsters who like their gas-fired latte but still want to shut down the means of producing it somewhere else. When you want to go green, you want to bring in these electric cars. You need some heavy metals. You need a lot of items, specialized woods for wind turbines, things like that. Well, it's making a mess in other places. You're not doing the environment a favor, and you're not doing human rights a favor when you've got some countries that don't have good human rights. I mean, so this is where it's from the testimony. It said, look at renewable energy supply chain issues. You have situations like the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 35,000 children used in child labor mining cobalt, which is used in lithium-ion batteries and electric cars. Now, let's develop more industries in Congo and in places like that. We want to see them prosper as well, but at the same time, we want to have a standard of human rights going on in there. People don't like thinking about that. They don't like thinking about that. We don't want to develop Alberta oil and gas, where we have and BC and Saskatchewan and the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. We don't want to develop that because it's bad. It's bad. Even though we have human rights here, labor protections, environmental protections, we have all of those things, but apparently we're still bad. And then we kind of put on our own blinders to what the alternatives are, which is things such as that going on in the Congo and stuff. We can't just keep ignoring, action, reaction. There's not enough discussion of these things, and it's costing all of us. Getting more into federal issues. I'm afraid it looks like Kid Carson isn't going to make it today. He was scheduled for some time back. Maybe he'll pop in. I'll talk a little longer. It's too bad. I was really looking forward to speaking with him. We'll see if we can reconnect and find out what went wrong in the communications with that. But either way, some of this other stuff coming up. A Public Service Commission was told about nepotism. This is a real shocker. In the federal hiring, 53% felt that appointments depend on who you know. Now, that applies to the private market in a lot of situations as well. But I mean, it is a problem. 47% of employees agreed with the statement, appointments don't depend on who you know. So it's kind of split. Those questionnaires with 75,000 federal workers. But you got to remember, if half of those federal workers got their jobs because of nepotism in the first place, they're not going to want to point out how bad it was. So I got a feeling that number might be a good deal higher than that. What's this from Patrick Borby? He said there's still areas for improvement. Yeah, you think? And the commission's going to work on it. Either way, nepotism is supposedly a firing offense in the public service. I doubt anybody's really been fired for it yet, though. I mean, the guy who is in charge of firing probably has a cousin who's a member of parliament who's got a friend who's a cabinet minister, so it's probably not going to happen. As Dave also said, yes, they're hiring consultants to check the work of other consultants in the multi-billion-dollar Phoenix pay system failure. That thing is something else. If you really want to read a tragedy of bureaucracy, read about the Phoenix pay system in the federal government. These guys can't even pay themselves right. That's how bad they are. And it's funny with some of those statements. Our government's really committed to providing high quality services to Canadians. We want this to ensure the best value for taxpayers. Says Fortier. Really? Really? You can't even get your payroll right in 20 years, guys. I find it very difficult to believe that you're that committed to giving us quality services for our tax dollars. Residential real estate ban. That's kind of dull. Finance committee. All right. I think it's time to move on just to talk about what we are going to do tomorrow. I'm assuming my guests are showing up tomorrow. We've got Joseph Quinnell, actually. He's from the Frontier Center on Public Policy, and he's been writing, he writes predominantly on Indigenous issues. And we're going to talk a bit about residential schools. I mean, it's a hot button area. It's definitely, worthy of some more open discussion. People are afraid of that subject. It's a sensitive one, but it's a big one. And talking to Joseph about it at length is going to be very good and important. Somebody's saying, how about Tamara? I haven't had a chance. I asked the newsroom to let me know if there's any ruling on her bail at this point, and I haven't got any updates. So I imagine they're still dragging their feet. When we started the show, they'd gone to recess. I mean, again, it's a bail hearing. It shouldn't take this long, but they really seem determined to keep this person locked up because she committed the crime of encouraging mischief. Yes, this is quite. Paul Hinman, when can we get him on? I've had Paul on a couple of times, and I'll probably get him again before the end of the by-election up in Fort McMurray and see where things are sitting. Right now, that's still ongoing, and it's sliding under the radar. There, what are we, 2 weeks away from Election Day up there in Fort Mac in that by-election, and it's put Paul's campaigning his butt off. He's been there for a couple of months on it, and I think there's like 8 other candidates in it. But realistically, I think it's the only ones to watch are going to be the UCP, of course, the NDP, and Paul Hinman. The rest are typically just the usual also-rans, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't dismiss everybody. I've been in also-ran in elections myself. Carmen, they brought her in with shackles. That was how insane it is. The judge did say take the shackles off. We're talking about Tamara Leach again, by the way, with her bail hearing. So as soon as I get any sort of news on it, though, I'll certainly pass it on to you. Also, after that, I'm going to talk to Alex McCall on Canada's response to the Ukraine-Russia war. He wrote a column in the Western Standard about that. and broke down some of the arms we can send them and things like that. He's our military writer. This is his specialty, and he knows a lot more on those issues than I. So we'll be able to discuss a little bit of what did Canada just send them. We sent some anti-tank things and I believe some night vision gear. And what else could we do or should we do? It'll be a good chat with Alex. So in closing, just remember to take out a subscription with us, guys. If you haven't already, that's where you'll see those columns. westernstandardonline.com/membership. Make sure to use the code TRIGGERED. Save yourself $10. Plus, it lets them know who sent you there, and that helps me out, of course, as well. So either way, I'm going to let you guys go, and we'll see if we can't track down Kid Carson and find out what happened there with a miscommunication or something like that. Maybe it's a time zone issue. These things happen on live shows. Thank you all for tuning in today. We got a good show coming tomorrow, and I will see you then at 11:30.